We'll go ahead and get started now that we have three of us that are here from the group. I want to go over a little bit of information in regard to a few updates that we have for the group. We do have some guests that we don't typically have on the call, and since it's a small enough group, I'd like for us to at least acknowledge and introduce them. So Matt, do you want to go ahead and say hello and tell us who you are and where you're from?
Yeah, hi, my name is Matt Brown. I live here in Denver, and I work with WT Partnership. Natrice and I have connected a while back, and we've had David and Matt McCleary, I think, who sat on this call before, and they were both tied up. So I was going to sit in today and just kind of get an update. And I also wanted to compliment you, Natrice, on the presentation during the AI presentation last week. That was great. So nice work.
Thank you. Alethea?
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Alethea Gomez. I'm the Director of Programs and Initiatives at EPIC, which is Executives Partnering to Invest in Children. And we certainly tap Natrice for many things, but we supported the development of the P3 office, and we're so happy to see it come to fruition. And she's also been supporting us in our work through our Building Up initiative, which focuses on strengthening childcare infrastructure across the state. So happy to be on this call and hear more about the work that's being done.
Thanks. Nathan?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nathan Batchelder, and I am with CRL Associates, and we're a local government affairs firm here in Denver that works very closely with market rate developers and affordable housing developers, really all across the state, as well as with a lot of other contractors and groups that work closely with public-private partnerships and lots of different agencies across Colorado. So we're very excited to watch the work that's going on here and become more involved, and really exciting things moving forward. So thank you so much for having us.
Thanks for being here. Thomas?
Hello, Tom John. I'm a partner in the law firm Ice Miller. I'm actually based out of Indianapolis, Indiana. I got to hear you last week present to AIAI, and you did a wonderful job, and I was intrigued with what you were doing, and I thought I'd listen in. So thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming. Apparently I've drawn some attention by doing the presentation. So it's good to see everybody coming in. And then my screen just changed. So we'll have our commissioners introduce themselves. Carrie, go ahead.
Sure. I'm Carrie Schiff. I'm chair of the Economic Development Commission, and I'm an advisor of this committee by virtue of that role.
Thank you. Simon?
Hello, my name is Simon Tafoya, also an EDC commissioner. I am on the commission representing the advanced industries.
Perfect. And Steve?
Stephen Pallets. I'm a commissioner on the EDC as well. And yeah, that's why I'm here.
And Elizabeth, I see you joined.
Hi, everyone. I am your guest speaker at 1020. I am the Vice President of Government Affairs for the Colorado Association of Realtors, and I'm just here to talk to you about Detroit. So I'm looking forward to talking to you all.
Thank you. And then my state partners, Jeff.
Good morning, everybody. Great to see you. Jeff Kraft, Deputy Director of OEDIT, and really I'm on this call because I work with Virginia to support the EDC. So I try and keep an eye on everything they're doing, and I want to support Natrice in all of her efforts as well. So great to see you and appreciate this group.
Thanks, Jeff. And Virginia.
Good morning, everyone. Virginia Davis, staff for OEDIT and EDC.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone. So now everybody knows who everybody is on the call. So I just want to make sure we're all very clear on that. I want to get into a couple of quick updates in regard to our program manager position. So we did receive 11 applications that made it past the minimum qualifications. And then those individuals were broken down to the final 4, which we're currently interviewing right now. So we should have a decision made for hiring our program manager within the next couple of weeks. So it won't be just a fierce team of 1.5, it'll be 2.5 people that will now be on the team to start working on some of our projects, and also start working on reviewing some of the proposals that we're going to start receiving. We have received an actual proposal that this committee will be reviewing in December. So really excited about that. And then we will share some of the additional information. So I'll bring that program manager if that person is brought on by December 13th, which is our next meeting. You will be able to meet them. If not, then I will bring them in January. So we are rapidly moving through that hiring process and really excited to be able to bring a new program manager to you all to talk through what they're going to be doing, how they're going to help me with some of the real estate transactions and financing decisions in regard to the types of proposals that we'll be approving. And I should hope to have, like I said, an offer out before the end of the holiday season. So really excited about that. The other piece I wanted to update us on is the publishing of the guidelines. So as you all know, we have run through several iterations of the guidelines, which this team has had an opportunity to see. There's a couple of things I want to make sure that we go over to let you know, like we've changed all the language. So we had gone through that probably, I want to say September, we went through the language changes to create consistency with statute. And now we'll have a program guideline document that'll be published on the website before the end of this calendar year. There are a couple of things that I'm going to be adding that I will send to commissioners to review, which is going to be the templates for each of our agreements. So our Office of State Controller has templates for design build finance, and then we have all of the rest of them. So we have about 6 templates that I'd like for you just to take a quick look at that we'll be using for all of our contracts for P3. I'm going to put links to those in the program guideline document so that individuals can take a look at the type of information that will be in their contract, as well as what type of information they'll need to provide. I don't want any surprises on that lens. I will send the link out to you all so you can take a look at it for December's meeting and review it. Let me know if you have any questions, but we're almost there. We're almost there for publication. The other piece that I do want to add, and I'm curious if anybody has any thoughts on this, is, oh, sorry, Simon, go ahead.
No, finish your thought and I'll ask when you're done.
Okay, perfect. I wanted to add the concept of requests for innovative concepts. So we have an RFI solicitation that we can do through the state government, but there is another concept that P3 has been able to utilize across the country, which is basically putting out a request for innovative concepts that allows for us to say we have a parcel of land at the state. We're not quite sure what to do with it, so we want to get best use back from that. We put that out for solicitation to the industry, and they come back with information of what they believe could be a good development for that land. We're looking at doing that potentially with our site at 1881 Pierce Street, which is the DMV site that's in Lakewood. So that is another concept that I will add. I will add the definition to it, send it out to you once again so that you can take a final look at the P3 guidelines with that additional component in the type of solicitation that we could do. Simon.
Okay, well, my initial question, I have 2 questions now after that comment, but my initial question was, are we going through a traditional RFI model, or are you planning to use the intent to negotiate tool? And are there other mechanisms at the, obviously once all the requirements are met, where you could utilize contracting mechanisms that are already established at the controller's office through the entities that are kind of like the umbrella contracting mechanisms, just to make things flow better. Obviously you're going to do your due diligence, but from a flow standpoint of contracting.
Yes, so we will use invitation to negotiate, ITN. We'll also use several of the other procurement strategies or procurement and solicitations that are already approved through the Office of State Controller so that we don't have to recreate the wheel. The only one that's not currently in there is the request for innovative concepts. So I will need to work with our team in procurement to make sure that we're able to do that through statute. There is an RFI, so request for information, but I want more information than just the fact of this is what we could do. I want to make sure that I'm more specific on the types of concepts that we could do. So when I put it out for RFI, I could say it has to be early childcare, housing, behavioral health, or broadband. But when I do the conceptualization behind it, I want to dig a little bit deeper about what actually the development could be. Could it be mixed use? Could it be a combination of different things? I don't want the developers to come back to us and say, oh, well, it could just be affordable housing, especially if the local government is anti-growth or not really looking at doing zoning to change the use of that land to that concept.
Yeah, and that kind of leads to my second question, which is, I mean, number one, that's great that you're gonna be looking at all options. Number two, like it, Pierce, I think that's in Lakewood, right? They,
Correct.
Does it, in having been on the Denver planning board, the zoning uses, all of those things are gonna, do you want to do that? Is the plan to have that legwork done in advance, where you're working with the city, so it's already like buttoned up so that the potential partner knows what use is intended? Or are you gonna, what you don't want to do is, I guess, waste everybody's time, which is they want to build a skyscraper, and I'm just kind of being extreme here, but they want to build a skyscraper, and you're like, that's not going to happen. Why? Don't even waste our time with and resources to be able to review these things when they have to be within a certain scope.
Right. Yeah. So we're actually going to do a feasibility study that includes partnership with the county and the city prior to an RFIC. So if Lakewood comes back to us and says, we don't want X on this site and we won't rezone it, or we want to purchase the land and we want to do something else with it, we'll know that before we put out the RFIC. Okay. So I'd like to have any type of solicitation that I do those types of conceptualization plans. I want to have a feasibility study done prior so that we know what the local government is flexible to and we know what they're not flexible to. So if they do come back with a skyscraper concept and we know that that's not what they're open to, we can actually list that in the solicitation.
Yeah, and I have one more thought.
That's fine.
Last question. So I know this kind of came up in our previous conversations, but looking at how to integrate like a social equity aspect to the requirements, or the what do you call it, whatever the standards that we're looking for a project on. So again, not trying to usurp the local authority that occurs through zoning, et cetera, and all the other local mechanisms, but how do you from a state perspective, if we're doing the partnership and it is state land and state resources, how are we going to best acknowledge that should be a component of what we're doing here?
I think that that's something that we would need to put in each individual project. So if we have a requirement, for example, one of the things that we're working on right now with one of the projects is we actually have an equity assessment that's part of the feasibility study that we're doing. So we could add that as a concept to be able to put in, like if we do a feasibility study, one of the requirements is that you have to consider social equity when it comes to whatever you're building and the impact to those neighborhood associations and the surrounding neighbors. So that's something we could consider adding. I don't know. I wonder if we could put it in the initial solicitation or if we can make it a requirement through the contract. In some of the solicitations, we can do like a preference for minority-owned businesses and veteran-owned businesses, things of that nature, but I can check to see how we would incorporate that as a requirement.
Yeah, I think, I mean, you wouldn't have to recreate the wheel here. I think there might be some examples out there, and I think even within our own partners, where we've done like Northwest, what's it called? The
Northwest Cog?
No, geez, I can't think today. The complex.
Oh,
GS.
National Western.
Yes, thank you. I knew it was North, but sorry.
Like National Western.
From me, yeah. Thank you. So I don't know, maybe there's some better practices that are out there where we're not necessarily being we're not dictating, but we are at least providing an expectation of what we mean by social equity, because obviously that can, somebody can interpret it in a specific way, and just in order just to check a box versus having true meeting the true meaning or intent of what this body is looking for.
Yeah. Let me talk to my attorney and see how we can incorporate that and see if we have some examples from, I don't know, even DIA. Like, how do they incorporate social equity when it comes to their project? So I'll check on that and I'll talk to the AG as well. Perfect. Does that answer all your questions?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Any other questions in regard to the P3 guidelines or anything that relates to our program manager position? Okay. All right. So we're right on track. I'm a minute early. Yay us. So I had sent out in the agenda, there are links to a lot of different articles that were provided by Elizabeth. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Detroit study. If you haven't had a chance to read all of those, I encourage you to do so. This is more of us learning more about some of our resources that we have, learning about what some cities are doing as we look at social and economic impacts to projects that are in cities that are larger. So Elizabeth's here to talk to us about Detroit. And if you haven't received the links, it will be posted online so you can take a look at them. It's attached to the agenda. And I'll also post them on our website as well. I just said that. So we're going to do that for you guys. Elizabeth, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you so much for allowing me to be with you. Can you all hear me? Okay, perfect. It is a pleasure to be with you guys. I had the wonderful opportunity to learn about Detroit a few years ago when I was attending an American Bar Association meeting, and they had the Planning Association come in and walk us through what happened with Detroit. And now I know you guys all have the links, so I'm just going to say the short version is people were essentially leaving the city of Detroit after massive mismanagement. And we all remember the Detroit Art Museum auctioning off the art to pay for the municipal bankruptcy, one of the biggest stories in the country. And I am pleased to say that they had a wonderful P3 approach that grew organically from the business community and a change in government that has led them to where they are today. And so I'm just going to walk through the high points, and then I also talked to my counterpart in Michigan to give you kind of the latest breaking news outside of just the resources that you guys were all sent. I have to say I was really impressed when I heard what they did after the situation Detroit found itself in. And essentially, it came down to some of the biggest employers in the city of Detroit deciding to make an investment in their city for the future. We're talking about folks like Quicken Loans, General Motors, who, as we all know, is going through a revitalization with their EV approach right now. And then some of the hospitals and healthcare systems around. They also moved some of the sports stadiums that used to be outside of the city right into the downtown. And this massive investment, I don't have the total number for you. I want to say it's close to $1 billion, and they're continuing to invest into the city every year, has all come about because they wanted to make this city of the future. Sorry, there's sirens going by me in the background. But one of the things that's so astronomically interesting about what they did with their approach is before they started doing the reinvestment, they took local citizens around the country to different cities and asked them to tell the city what they wanted to see in their city, like what isn't in Detroit that they want to see. I've never seen a city do that in such a dramatic fashion. Then they came back and hired 47 city planners. And I know there's a link to the planning department. You can kind of see the projects they identified. And they started going out and writing in the projects. So the approach is a combination approach. What they did was obviously move investment downtown like the stadiums, refurbish existing properties, and especially for residential homeowners whose properties may have fallen under repair, there was funding for that. There was funding to repurpose existing commercial property. And then they also asked for specific local projects, like block by block in the neighborhoods. The other thing, we always hear the word gentrification, right? And I think Detroit is one of those cities who is doing it right and will have to continue fighting to get it right. What is really cool about what they did is they picked a local project to put into each sort of project or each neighborhood. And one of the ways they made sure it was local was really interesting. And I'd love to see us look at this in Colorado, but they actually invested in local DEI groups and made sure they had the expertise to be able to compete to win the RFPs. Now, that's one of the things that is really interesting to see. I mean, as some of our senior planning staff ages out, they can help advise, but they're making sure DEI is not only front and center in trying to prioritize projects in the neighborhoods, but they're actually going out there and making sure that Detroit is hiring Detroit. And that's very cool to see that they're making that change for the rest of the city. So I think that is one of the biggest things that they have done very well, leaning into DEI in the right way that enhances the ability for them to continue to grow. They've also really invested in what I would call walkability and transit zones from these neighborhoods that are right outside the downtown core. And so you'll see in the planning department, there's a bunch of focus on bikeways and things like that to make sure that people can live in where they live now or in the exterior of the city, but still access the city core. So that's, and then they also spend a lot of time with down payment assistance and making sure people come to Detroit, they have the ability to keep that affordable for the foreseeable future. My colleague calls Detroit, as opposed to Chicago, dysfunctional corruption, and that's their legacy, whereas Chicago is functional corruption, which is kind of comical when you think about it. But the story of what they've done now is now leaning into some of that legacy of the mismanagement of the property valuation. So we now know that Detroit properties were overtaxed about $600 million in property tax revenue, valuing them higher than they actually were valued. And so now this investment group, this P3 group, is now investing in property tax relief for property owners, which I think we can find very interesting here in Colorado, as we know how high our housing prices went. They're doing it to address historic corruption, but I think keeping people in their homes is so important as we think about maintaining neighborhood character. Now, they have to continue to fight to have those neighborhoods feel included. So that requires a lot of time spending in neighborhoods, making sure the projects meet the neighborhoods. We all know the no growth and the NIMBY sentiment can be very strong no matter where you live. But what my colleague has told me that they also did recently is they changed their representation system. They used to have an at-large district system, and they changed it to just be by geographic district, because that is the way they kept it accountable. Because if it was an at-large district, you could live outside of the area, but the local residents had no way to hold them accountable to what projects are you putting in the neighborhood. I defer to my city of Denver colleagues as to how they want to structure their government. That's not my job, but that is one of the things that they are doing. And they're continuing to now go out and find the financial capital to support these neighborhood projects. But it's not just identify a project, put the RFP out, and then go find the funding to make sure it happens. It's continuing to keep the neighborhood apprised of what's happening in the neighborhood as they do it, that has really made Detroit a success. And that's something they will have to continue. You'll see some of the links are not all positive. Some of them do say that that the redevelopment is happening too fast. That is a battle Detroit has to continue having to keep the community involved and make sure it's the projects that they want to see. So I'm going to stop there. I don't know if you have any questions, but I hope that you'll take a look at some of the links. I'm fascinated by what Detroit has done, and I hope we can learn some lessons here in Colorado.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Any questions?
I just want to thank Elizabeth for joining us. I had met her and learned about what was going on in Detroit and thought it would be useful for us. When I went through all the materials, if you look on the planning website for the city, in the section on the Joe Louis Greenway neighborhood planning study, you can see where they talk about under the how will the neighborhood planning study benefit long-term residents. So they're doing these planning studies and then executing on, what they determine might be best. And it seems like there's a ton of community engagement going on early to help guide what should be done, and it's done locally, which I thought was really helpful. And we've talked about that, and when we talked about our policy document, is where is the community engagement happening? And I kind of feel like that would help support what Simon was raising for us before about social equity. But I was particularly taken in that page I was referencing, where they talk about the investments they're making in strategies such as homeowners stabilization programs, affordable housing and preservation, wealth building opportunities, workforce development, and small business support through an equity lens, which to me gives you, from my perspective, it seems like a very holistic approach to how we're going to take these assets and redevelop them. And I know that we have, sort of our however many targets, I don't remember, 4 targets, our 4 targets, and they really read a lot on on that list I just referenced. But if I was thinking about innovation and projects, what to me would be exciting is if those projects came and we're being thoughtful about some of those issues, like workforce development as part of this development, or wealth building opportunities, which can go towards, I think, what Elizabeth was mentioning around, DEI focus, supporting those organizations that can help train and support local businesses to be able to, I don't know if it's lease commercial space or win a contract to provide maintenance for the building, or I don't know what all of the opportunities are, but just seems like those are things I think of as innovative and helpful. So I'll pause at that.
I agree. I think, sorry, Elizabeth, I'll add one thing to what Carrie said. I don't mean to cut in line, but on the hands that are up. But in our document, we talk about stakeholder engagement. And Simon, I think this is exactly what you mean. Like, we can't just build it and hope that it doesn't impact the neighborhood. We have to do some sort of engagement and due diligence with the neighborhood associations, but also the surrounding community to see, if we build X, what is that going to do for the community? How will it change or not change the dynamic? Housing will change the dynamic of the community. Early child care centers may increase and enhance, but do we have enough workforce to supplement what we're doing? So I think that in our stakeholder engagement, I think that as we're looking at projects and as we're scoring them, you'll see on the document that I show later on, stakeholder engagement is a part of how we score, and it actually is weighted higher in weighting versus some of the other concepts, because that's such an important aspect. So thanks for bringing that up, both of you. Jeff.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Elizabeth, that was really interesting. I did have one question. I wanted to learn a little bit more about, I was intrigued when you said that you supported RFP respondents that had DEI characteristics to make sure they had enough capacity to win the RFP. Would you mind crystallizing that a little bit? Just give me like a granular example of like what the RFP was for and who the respondent might be and how you supported them, just so we can take something really specific away from that example.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to, Jeff. And I did not get involved in this, or the realtors didn't get involved in this directly. So I'm relaying what the city did, just to be clear. But what they did, which I think is really interesting that you are raising in your question, is when they went out and found local architects, planners that were diverse, and they actually gave technical assistance to allow them to know how to compete for the RFPs, whether that was educational, professional training, or literally just technical assistance of how to apply for the grant and how to be competitive. And what I believe they've found is after they did those initial trainings, if they got one contract from the city, they're now then prepared to compete for other things that may be inside or outside the city. And so it's investing in local talent in addition to making sure they're preserving small businesses in the community. So it's both the protecting existing business, but protecting professionals or investing in professionals to be competitive, to be able to compete against folks in the future.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. That helps to have a little bit more meat on the bones of that. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Alethea?
Yeah, thank you. I was curious. I know we've talked about childcare in a number of different ways in relationship to community development, including affordable housing, as well as the renovation of residential spaces. And I think it was interesting that you mentioned this investment involved the city's largest employers. I was on a call the other day and heard from a Detroit team, and they talked about providing technical assistance to childcare providers, as well as trying to strengthen the workforce in different ways. And I thought that was very interesting. Can you speak to the importance or impact to the employer's workforce that chose to invest in this, and how childcare fits into that potentially $1 billion investment?
Oh, I love that question. Because while I don't do childcare directly, it's near and dear to my heart as I had nieces and nephews. And obviously we know in Colorado, we've got one of the 8th highest costs of childcare in the entire country. So I believe that the way that Detroit has approached this in the most comprehensive sense, they're trying to get a sense of what the neighborhood and the community needs, and the employers. If you are going into work at, and it's a good job, it's downtown at Quicken Loans, but there's nowhere for you to drop your kid off on the way to school, then you're not going to have a talented workforce that either relocates to your city or stays in your city. And so the comprehensive approach to thinking about zoning in a creative way, if you can build housing near open space, near childcare, near healthcare, makes for a walkable, diverse, vibrant neighborhood that has longevity, both for existing residents and future residents. And to be honest, after the pandemic, we are thinking about how do we repurpose property, especially if we have a remote capacity to our workforce and talent. And in Colorado, we have a highly educated workforce too. So if there's no way for us to think about the transit zones of how we actually live our lives, right? Like if you can transit east-west, but your daycare is north-south, your transit doesn't work because you got to drop your kid off on the way to school or in daycare. So I think they go hand in hand, and employers realize if we don't have the right talented workforce or invest in our community, they can't create intergenerational wealth for the long run. And that is the way we invest back into the city. So I think you guys are tackling it in the right way, and I hope you guys will look at that as you move forward with really interesting projects.
Yeah, and do you know how they're approaching data collection as part of the efficacy of this investment in impacting what those critical areas are going to be? I know in Colorado, we're thinking a lot about how data is collected in our prospective regions and communities, and understanding how we can use that data, right, to impact future investments.
I don't know for sure, but I would suspect it's unfortunately going to be a robust effort of capturing what is publicly available data or data you can purchase from private sector platforms that have some sort of housing nexus. But I also think if you don't have a component of neighborhood engagement and survey, you're going to miss pieces of that neighborhood component. Like, for example, we know what the property tax revenues are for residential owners, but that doesn't capture renters in the same way. And all of them need to live in a diverse, vibrant community. So it is probably multi-pronged if I had to guess, but that's a good question to pose back to the city of Detroit.
Okay, thank you.
And Simon.
I guess I just want to pull back a little bit and a little bit of a bird's eye view and kind of talk about what we intend to do and what you have the capacity to do in terms of this sort of outreach. I mean, I know, Patrice, you know this well, and I'm sure others on the call who have been part of these development projects or even programmatic projects can be quite arduous and have long processes within the localities that they exist. So if you're developing, again, the Pierce project, does it fit into a master plan that's already been developed by the city of Lakewood that, maybe they want to, there's something totally different that we don't have the capacity to do the outreach, so to speak, but we kind of lean on the partner in the city to be able to make sure that's either it's been done or needs to be done, so that, I don't think your team has the capacity to be able to do all of that sort of outreach that has traditionally been done through the zoning process and through the permitting processes that exist in the corresponding jurisdiction. So I guess I don't want to, I just want to kind of calibrate in terms of where, what our role is and what we anticipate getting into.
That's a great question, Simon. And I appreciate you looking at my org chart and figuring out that I don't have the capacity to be able to do all of that. We actually are working with a consultant on a statement of work, and they are going to do the stakeholder engagement and outreach for us. And so part of what that statement of work will look like once it's finished, I will bring it back. So it'll probably be around December that you'll have a chance to take a look at the statement of work and what we are going to do. But that's going to be easily a 6 to 8 month process that hasn't been done because technically that particular parcel, or all three of them, there's 3 parcels at 1881. There's 2 that are adjacent to the DMV, and there's 1 that's at 1901 Reed Street, which is about 5.3 acres. In total, it's 13 acres of land, but there's 3 different parcels that we're working on. So we actually are working on a statement of work with a consultant to be able to do that stakeholder engagement for us. They will then bring that back as part of the feasibility study. And I think it's going to take a lot of those types of things to happen in order for us to be able to understand how we open up the doors, which is why we'll do feasibility first, which includes stakeholder engagement, bringing in the city, seeing if they had a plan and if they're interested in buying any of those parcels, or if they haven't looked at it because we've never really opened up those 3 parcels of land to sale, if it would be something that they would consider for their new developments, if there are any in that neighborhood. So we do have money to hire consultants to help us with that because the capacity of our team is small enough that it would take us more time to do it on our own. So we will be hiring a consultant to do that work for us. The stakeholder piece is, like I said, about 6 months of work to bring in the county and the city to see what their current plans are, what they're doing with that particular area as redevelopment starts to occur. But I think it's going to depend project by project. Do we bring in a consultant to do this? Do we look at if someone proposes on land, if a partner comes to us and submits a proposal and says, we want to do X on this land, we can ask that be part of their plan to move forward. They have to submit information and submit things that show that they've done their due diligence. And I think in our scoring criteria, that second section that looks at how they've done their due diligence is going to be an important question for us to ask when we bring those projects to this committee, because if it hasn't been done, then maybe we go back and say until it's done, we won't look at funding the project because we want to make sure that it's done appropriately.
The only thing I would add to what Natrice said is when you get to the phase of when it can be transparent, making sure you are as transparent to the public and going back to the neighborhood, not just in the who's gonna get the project, but going back and socializing, hey, this is what's being built, this is what's being, the local investment in your community, I think is valuable, because so often people do it only at the front end and not as you go all the way along. And I don't know if that's a consultant or if it's engaging with trusted organizations in the community, but I do think thinking about making sure it's transparent when it can be to the public all the way along is important.
Simon, one other thing, and then I'll be quiet and see if I answered your question appropriately. When we're looking at some of the larger projects on the template for proposal, when they submit it to the P3 office, one of the questions is the social impact that this will have on community. So they have to answer that question, and they also bring that to this committee, which you'll see in December, which will be one of the questions that I hope we ask our first proposal group of how are they doing the work that we are asking them to do. So it's insinuated in the social community, in the social impact question on the proposal. But if we need to ask deeper questions and dig deeper in this whole review process, we're absolutely able to do that. Does that capture what you were asking?
Yeah, I guess it's, yeah, no, I think my comment was more of a cautious warning of, or, you know, cautionary warning of getting too far deep into processes that we can't control. And that's kind of, again, that really leans on multiple partnerships. Obviously it's P3, but it's the whole premise of the thing, and these challenges come along, but I just want to make sure that we don't get too far away from, I think, what is our role, which is, I think, more of a, you know, what I would imagine is like, should we be prioritizing transit-oriented development sites that the state owns? Should we be prioritizing places where we could leverage or use properties that we can, you know, also co-site broadband kind of expansion, you know, those sorts of things where, you know, getting too far into the neighborhood politics, I guess, if you want to put it that way, becomes